Good morning all and welcome to the TPN YouTube channel. We are live in studio today. Just a few admin things before we get going. As usual, you need to be logged into YouTube to access the chat on your right hand side. Also, please stay until the end. We are going to open up our feedback forms 15 minutes during the Q&A session for an hour thereafter. Important for our own feedback, but obviously important for your own unverified CPD points. With me in studio today is Michelle Dickens. She's going to facilitate our Q&A. Good morning, Michelle.
Hi, Peter, and hi to our delegates joining in. Please ask questions. I love interrupting Peter to get your questions on air for him to answer.
I actually heard something very interesting over the radio yesterday. They asked people, when does Christmas, or when do they know that Christmas is actually coming about? And one person said it's when they hear the Mariah Carey song, All I Want for Christmas Is You. And I heard it twice on the radio yesterday. So all I want for Christmas this year is for you all to be fully POPI compliant. And we're going to take you through that entire journey. With us in this session today, we are going to go through the first module on the POPI portal. So as you all heard probably last week during Michelle, Abel and myself when we actually introduced the POPI portal to you, we're going to take you through an entire journey on how to be compliant yourself through your personal information impact assessments. Remember, you can purchase the TPN POPI portal directly. We are going to share the links for that as well. And also, remember, the first step in the process is your TPN POPI readiness survey or review. Michelle is going to post that link right now into the chat. You can access that. Go and run your own review on your POPI readiness to assess exactly where you are currently sitting. Regardless, whether you are 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% compliant at this point in time, or rather ready for POPI at this time, you are going to be able to access the TPN POPI portal to do your own personal information impact assessment directly through the system. We've tried to make it as simplified and as easy to access for you as possible through the system so that you can run your entire personal information impact assessment directly through the TPN POPI portal. Just a few important things. We did get a lot of questions last week during the session that we might not have gotten to. Remember, POPI currently is not yet effective. You've still got 7 months to run your personal information impact assessments as well as to be fully POPI compliant on all your functions in your business. So that date is the 1st of July. Please remember that. You've got 7 months to do this entire process, and we're going to walk you through the entire process throughout these modules that we are running on POPI compliance. Also, for your theoretical knowledge, we're going to get Abel in. He's actually coming in next week, Monday, to do a pre-recorded session for you specifically on the POPI theory. So a review of the POPI theoretical things that you might not necessarily understand. We're going to talk a little bit about, let's call it penalties and offenses in terms of the Act, who the information regulator is, how the process is going to work going forward, and we're going to continuously update you through the 7-month journey that you are going to go on for your entire POPI process and your compliance process through the TPN POPI portal. The second step, obviously, in this process is the TPN POPI portal and doing your own personal information impact assessment. Like I said, we are going to run through some of the functions of that system today. I'm going to try and simplify everything as far as possible for you. I'm going to run through 2 different subsections today to make it easier for you to understand exactly what you need to complete and to give you some context into the TPN POPI portal and making yourself POPI compliant before that effective date of the 1st of July next year. So, to get started on this, and Michelle, please interrupt me if we do have questions during the session.
I absolutely will. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Michelle. So, what you'll notice first when you log into the TPN POPI portal is that it is going to open up a page that looks very similar to this. This is going to allow you to fill out your business structure. And this is vitally important because the questions that you get asked, the different sub-functions or the different sub-processes in the functions, let's say, for example, of governments, is going to change depending on what you complete in your settings section, setting your own structure of your business. We're going to take our case study once again that we've used for the initial introduction during last week's session. That session is available for you on YouTube. You can go and have a look at it if you missed it last week. So the company structure is very important. You need to select whether you are a sole proprietor, a private company, or a public corporation. And like I said, your personal information impact assessment through the TPN POPI portal is going to change depending on what you've completed. For today's purposes, using the case study, I'm going to select private company. I'm going to call our company name TPN. And our company size is currently 30 employees with 25,000 clients. Then you click Save. Once you've clicked Save, the system is automatically going to generate those questions for you through your impact assessment as well as through your overview, which we will access right away after I've explained a very important next step to you in the procedure. Now, the next step that I want you to follow is click on the staff button on the left-hand side. And as you'll see, I've already pre-populated certain people in our office that is going to be held accountable as the accountable person in filling out and completing these specific functions of the business. Yes, Michelle,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you please go back to the entity,
of course. Let's go back.
Company structure.
Yes.
And just tell us where we would enter a partnership entity or a trust entity.
Okay, for a partnership or a trust entity, depending how your business has been structured, remember with private companies, PTY limiteds, as well as certain of you might still have closed corporations, you're going to select a private company. Whereas if you are trading in your own personal capacity, and that means you don't necessarily have a board of directors, you don't have shareholders of the business, you are busy trading it yourself. Also, from an individual landlord perspective, you're obviously going to select sole proprietor as well. Michelle, hopefully I've answered that question.
So I think for the immediate answer, for people that are trading as a trust, or as a body corporate, or as a closed corporation, please enter as a private company.
Yes.
This is not, and we will update to enter those in. Thank you for that feedback. It's more about setting up what the company's governance would look like. So please do enter it as a private company for this particular presentation.
That's exactly it, Michelle. And like I said, depending on what you complete here, it is going to change your module selection in your overview, or rather in your personal information impact assessment. So it's vitally important that you get this right from the start. Thank you, Michelle. Click Save. Once again, I'm going to access that staff button. As you see, I've already pre-populated 3 people on our business that is going to be held accountable depending on the certain functions that they must perform in terms of your personal information impact assessment directly through the system. So to add another user, I'm going to click Add over there. I'm going to fill out my own details just to make it simple because I know those. And I'm going to click on that. As you see, it's very, very simple. You just go fill out all the details of the accountable person or the person in your office that you would like to have complete the functions through the system. Then I'm going to click Save. And as you see, it has already saved. Regardless, there are no associated processes yet because I haven't set those up in the personal information impact assessment or from my overview. And then obviously it has been enabled. Now, we had so many questions last week, and I had lots of calls afterwards and lots of WhatsApps afterwards. Remember, this is a process, and that's why we're taking you through the steps each and every single 2 weeks so that you can know exactly how this process is supposed to flow in your own business. It does not mean that you're going to be POPI compliant tomorrow. It is a process. We're going to hold your hand and we're going to take you through the entire system through this module training. So next, to start the entire process of your personal information impact assessment, just like what we showed you last week, you're going to click on Impact Assessment and click on Overview on the left-hand side. Now, what you'll notice straight away is there are certain functions in your business that you need to perform information impact assessment on. The first one of those is governance, and this is the one that I'm going to access today. Next is finance. Then there's human resources, information technology, operations, your legal, as well as your sales and marketing. You can see on certain of these I've already started completing them, but remember, throughout this process we're going to teach you exactly how to do those. I'm going to click on the governance function for today. Now, the important thing to contextualize over here is this is a personal information impact assessment on the governance of your business. What you'll notice straight away as a sole proprietor is you are not going to have certain sub-processes. You're not going to have board of directors because you don't have one, or an exco, shareholders or members, manco, but you are going to have certifications down at the bottom. The certifications one is one of the most vital ones to complete, specifically as a private entity as well as a sole prop. So this one I'm going to leave until I've finished the board of directors, and then I'm going to move into the certifications just to show you exactly how to contextualize this entire process. Also to take note is that just like last week, we have this inherent risk, we've got the residual risk, and then we've got behavioral risk. And I'm going to take you through what questions impact these specific risks during the review procedure in terms of your personal information impact assessment. So I'm going to access the board of directors sub-process through that. Then you'll already note that I can fill out general information as well as all the other information, just like what we did last week. But you need to contextualize this. As a private company or a public entity, your board typically meets quarterly to set specific policies in place, to discuss management processes, to discuss how the business is actually functioning. But remember, in those board packs, everything that you are disseminating through that process, there is not going to be a lot of personal information attached to the process, or with the board packs and the documentation that you make available to your board of directors, there's not necessarily going to be a lot of personal information that is impacted. Remember, we ran through the debtors portion last week, and that was quite a high volume of information that you are going to process, because remember, you're dealing with your tenants specifically on your book. In a process like this, you might not have a lot of personal information that is impacted. So you need to contextualize this when you're answering the questions yourselves. So the general information is vitally important. Remember, I've actually just done this in adding myself, so I'm going to add myself as the accountable person. That means that I'm going to complete this process and I'm going to take responsibility for this process going forward. It is in progress. We are busy doing it at this point in time, and the due date we are going to set, let's say, for Friday this week. I'm going to click save. Then the next 4 questions is going to set up specifically your inherent risk of the business. How much, what is the volume of personal information being processed, and what type of personal information is impacted as a result of the board of directors meeting on a monthly basis. And what we've got over here, because I've run through this already with our case study, is that the volume of personal information that I am going to process in this instance is going to be relatively low. So I'm going to mark it as low. Does it contain sensitive personal information? And I did not explain this well enough last week, so I'm going to do so right now. If you're unsure what sensitive personal information, special personal information, or information relating to GDPR is through the systems, all you need to click is this information key. It is going to open up a TPN wiki for you that is going to explain what sensitive personal information is, also what special personal information is, as well as what the GDPR is and what it relates to. But as we all know, sensitive personal information is specific identifiers of a party. It could include things like ID numbers and specifically bank details. Whereas special personal information is going to fall under a different category. It includes information like religious or philosophical beliefs, race or ethnic origin, as well as biometric information, so all of that access information. This is not necessarily information that you're going to process in your governance section from a board of directors perspective. And then the GDPR, like we explained last week, is specifically on European citizens. It is the legislation that is governing their protection of personal information.
Peter, if I can
Yes,
just
Michelle.
jump in and provide clarity. So what we're talking about here is the board of directors, who are the board members,
Yes.
it's their personal information.
Yes.
So if I'm the board of directors at a company and they have my information as part of their procedures,
yes.
they have a responsibility to ensure that my information as a board member is protected.
That is so correct, Michelle. You've got to take this into consideration. Remember, it's processing of personal information, so it's all personal information. So you need to contextualize that properly when you are busy formulating and filling out these questions. So does it contain sensitive personal information? It most probably is going to contain sensitive personal information because it might have identifiers specifically of the board of directors, those directors in the business. So we're going to click yes. Does the board pack or the procedure that you're going to follow with your board of directors contain special personal information? Most probably not. It's not going to contain things like biometric details, etc. So we're going to click no on this one in terms of our case study. And does it contain special information or personal information relating to European citizens in terms of their legislation, the GDPR? And we're going to select no.
Although you
Yes?
could
Of
have
course,
a
you
member
could have.
on your board who has a GDPR citizenship.
Most certainly you can, Michelle. For our case study specifically, they did not have European citizens on their board. And I'm going to click save. Remember, the save functionality is also very important. Once I click save, it is going to save that specific question. Remember, once again, those first 4 questions is going to set up my inherent risks. So even if I go out of this section and I go into my overview, you'll notice already that 20% of the questions have been asked or answered already in this instance. Now, the information processed as well as your control measures is going to set up my residual risk. What control measures and processes have I already put in place to control the access to as well as the processing of personal information in my business, taking into consideration once again your board of directors and your governance function. So the system where my personal information is stored is going to be, in this instance, my server. It is going to be available on paper and electronic format. If I do say now, for example, print out packages for the board of directors meeting, and the level of access control I'm going to include as high specifically for this business. I'm going to show you exactly why that is later going through the control measure question, but they do already have certain control measures in place for this. Then I'm going to click save. The control measures relate to things that you are implementing in your business to make sure that you do have a specific control or you are protecting personal information in a specific manner. Now, the control measures that were in place for the board of directors, for the governance functioning, was specifically a management review. So they are reviewing this process each and every single month, as well as electronic and physical access control. Electronic access control is things like password protection, etc., everything that you have on your systems allowing people access to the business. And physical access control measures could include things like keys to the server room, tag access to certain parts of the business. And I'm going to click save. Now, these important questions, and that's why we call them important questions, is because they deal directly with the 8 principles of lawful processing in terms of the Act. This is the most important. The reason being is that these deal with the legality of the processing of personal information in terms of your systems. Once again, I'm going to take our case study as an example, and I'm going to answer it as if I am the case study. Okay, is the processing of personal information done lawfully in terms of your board of directors? Yes, it has been done lawfully. Has it been done in a reasonable manner, not to infringe the data subject's privacy? Yes, it has been done so. We are not necessarily taking more information than what is required, and that's also the second or the third part of this question is, have you applied the rule of minimality? So are you processing only the information that you're supposed to process and not more information than you currently have to process in terms of the specific board of directors procedure? Okay, yes, we have done so. Is the collection of personal information done for a specific and explicitly defined purpose? Yes, it is. We are doing this. We are using this personal information, processing this personal information specifically for this board member process, as well as your board of directors when they meet that specific process. So we're going to mark yes. Have you obtained consent from all the data subjects in this area where it is considered mandatory in this regard in terms of the Act? You need to process this personal information in terms of your board of directors, in terms of many different parts of legislation, specifically relating to perhaps your CIPC processes, your SIPS process, how to register the business. If you've got changes in the governance and your board of directors, this is also going to be taken into consideration. So in this regard, no, we don't need consent, but in an instance where we do, you're going to mark yes as well. Michelle, I think we've got questions. Not yet.
Peter, yeah, I was just gonna clarify from you.
Yes,
so,
please.
Protection of Personal Information Act requires that either the data subject gives consent or that there's a legal requirement in order to fulfill the obligations of the business.
100%. And in an instance like this specifically, there is a legal requirement to process this personal information. So, for example, you're changing details of the director members through the CIPC process to register that. That's obviously going to be required in terms of that process to be able to process that information. Now, the data usage questions, once again, vitally important. It sets out those 8 pillars of lawful processing of the personal information. Do you notify the data subject as required by POPI when collecting the personal information? In this instance, yes, they did notify everybody that they required to process this personal information. They actually asked the consent. Has the retention and restriction of records been formalized? They have not yet put in place a specific procedure and a policy for the retention and restriction of records. So I'm going to mark that as no, they have not done so. And is this personal information used for another purpose that is not specifically defined? Remember that first question we answered. No, we're only using the personal information specifically for this process and this purpose. Is it updated, accurate, and not misleading? So this is very important in terms of POPI, a question that you need to always ask. Yes, all of this is updated. We've asked new information of the parties. Are you satisfied that the appropriate security measures are in place to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the personal information? And on this one, we're going to select partially because some of our processes have not yet been completed. And then I'm going to click Save. I'm going to take you back to the specific dashboard module screen to show you how everything has changed as a result of me filling out these specific questions on my board of directors or my governance function. And as you can see, 20% of the questions have now been answered, and my inherent risk is only set at medium because remember, I am not processing a lot of personal information. It's merely what we've discussed already when we went through it. There is a low risk for my residual. That means that the residual risk of this information being processed in an incorrect manner is going to be set at low. And my behavioral risk specifically relating to the 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of POPI is also going to be low in this regard for my board of directors. Now, one of the sub-processes that you all are going to complete, whether you are a sole prop, whether you are a private corporation, whether you are a public entity, is going to be this last one, this certifications. And I'm going to try and contextualize this for you in the most simplistic fashion while we're going through this. Looks exactly the same. Remember, we've got that inherent risk, the residual risk, as well as the behavioral risk on this as well. And I'm going to click Review. Okay.
Peter, I know
Yes,
that
Michelle.
you're now jumping onto the inherent risk portion of this sub-process.
Yes.
And Shanaz has just asked if you could quickly give us what the inherent risk is again. So if you could just define for us what inherent risk is.
Of course. So the inherent risk of your business is going to be formulated on these specific 4 questions that you're going to answer right in the beginning. This is dependent purely on the volume of personal information that you are processing during the specific sub-function in your business. So just to give us some context, just looking at certification, because we're going through certification now. Remember, as an estate agent specifically, you are going to have certain processes that you need to follow to be certified, whether that be with your specific institution, like the Estate Agency Affairs Board. In this process, the one that we always come up with is your Fidelity Fund certificate, and how important that is. But through that specific process of you getting your Fidelity Fund certificate, there is going to be a volume of personal information that is going to be processed, as well as certain forms of personal information. Your sensitive personal information, special personal information, as well as personal information relating to GDPR or European citizens. So those 4 questions is going to set up your inherent risk. The volume of personal information processed, but also what type of personal information is being processed. And depending how you answer those questions, it is going to either give you a higher, middle, or low risk category, specifically on your inherent risk, how much information you're actually being processed and what is being processed. Another function when you're talking about certification might be something like debt collectors. If you're a registered debt collector as an estate agent, you might have to follow a process where personal information is actually being processed by the regulatory authority or specifically that institution, and you need to make that personal information available. So when we're talking about certification and your inherent risk, that is exactly the type of things we are talking about. Good, Michelle?
And I think we also put on there FICA.
We did put FICA on here as well.
So you need to be registered with the FIC,
of course,
and
yes.
Same process.
And also through the FICA procedure with the certification, there might be processes where you, say for example, report somebody in terms of FIC for cash transactions, etc. So that process will also fall under your certifications. So select the accountable person. Once again, I'm going to select myself to fill out this process. You can also fill out multiple parties, but I'm just going to use myself here. It has been assigned to me, and I'm going to make that due date a little bit later. Let's make it in March of next year. Then I'm going to click save. Now, once again, running through the inherent risk, we've got to ask ourselves these questions contextually on your certification processes. So the volume of personal information being processed in this function. This might also not be very high, but obviously there is some processing of personal information because you need to give details to get your FFC. You need to make that personal information available to that specific authority, whether that be through FICA processing as well as through your State Agency Affairs Board Fidelity Fund certificates. So I'm going to select this as medium. Does it contain sensitive personal information? And remember, once we've clicked that wiki, it's going to once again open that up. And it's going to tell me what sensitive personal information is. To process this, to get my FFC, I'm going to have to process some sensitive personal information. ID numbers or identifiers of the party that needs to be granted their FFC. So yes, it does do that. Does it contain special personal information? And this you need to go and have a look at specifically. You need to go and make sure that with this procedure, you applying for your FFC, you actually getting your FFC through your Council of Debt Collectors. What information are you actually being or supplying? In this instance, no special personal information was processed, but it is very possible through your own certification methods or through your different, let's call it, institutions that certain special information could have been processed here. Does it contain personal information of European citizens? Perhaps it does, but in this instance for our case study, no, once again, it did not. And then I'm going to click save. Now my inherent risk has already been set. Once again, these questions now relate to your residual risk, and that is specifically the risk that you have in place, but also how are you combating that risk through your specific control measures that you are busy utilizing. So system where the personal information is stored, you might have internal procedure specifically relating to how these things are captured on your systems. For our business that we are going to do, they specifically saved everything on their internal servers. They might be cloud-based in certain instances, and you need to fill those out correctly as well. Paper or electronic, it is both on paper and electronic. The submissions process was through paper. And then the level of access control. Once again, this case study that we were specifically talking about had quite a high level of access control to the specific data that is being processed through the certification. So we're going to click high on this one and click save. Now, the control measures and what you have in place to regulate the specific procedure, the submission of the personal information through to the relevant authority. What we do have in place is electronic access control, of course, and physical access control like the previous section. And then this business had a checklist in place when it came to processing of the personal information. What information needed to be captured in terms of your certification process, and they had a checklist for that. So we're going to click save. Now it once again comes to the important sections. And I'm sorry for the reiteration here, but they are vitally important because they deal specifically with the processing of the personal information. Remember those 8 pillars of lawful processing of personal information that we dealt with in the theory in the first section that Abel presented. So, is the processing of personal information taking place lawfully? Yes, it has been. Is it done in a reasonable manner and does not infringe on the data subject's privacy? Yes, that is correct as well. Have you applied the rule of minimality? So is it adequate, relevant, and not excessive? Yes, correct. Is the collection of personal information being done for a specific and explicitly defined purpose? In this section, of course, it has been done for a specific and defined purpose. We need to get our certifications, so we're going to click yes on that. And have you obtained consent from all data subjects in this area where it is considered mandatory according to the Act? Remember that same question. Is it as a result of legislation that I'm following this process? Is it a legal requirement that I must process this personal information, and is consent required in this instance? We are going to select yes, we have gotten consent. We got all the information directly through the parties that are involved through the certification process, and we're going to click save. Now with the data usage questions, once again, vital. How is the data utilized? How is it processed in the business? And what measures are in place? Do you notify the data subject as required by POPI when collecting the personal information from them directly? Yes, we do, but in this instance, many of the occasions, specifically on certification, is not necessarily going to require this. Has the retention and restriction of records been formalized? Once again, similar to the previous one, there was no process in place here yet, and it has not been formalized for the retention and restriction of records. And is it used for a different purpose, not specifically defined in terms of your procedure? No, it is not. Have you ensured that the personal information is complete, accurate, and not misleading? Yes, we are. Through the certification process, we need to make absolutely certain that we are processing the correct personal information and that the information we're providing through to the authority is not misleading. So we're going to select yes. And then, are you satisfied that the specific or appropriate security measures have been put in place, taking into consideration, once again, confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the personal information? And just like the previous one, we're going to select partially on this and click save. And as simple and easy as that, the portal does it for you. You need not do anything else in this regard. It is going to give you your specific overview. It is going to give you all your indicators. Just like with the previous one, we've got a medium inherent risk, a low residual risk, as well as a low behavioral risk. Now, with the specific process as well, once you have completed certain of these sub-functions, there are going to be policies and procedures made available to you, as well as an action plan for your furtherance of specifically POPI compliance. And we're going to show you that throughout these specific modules. I'm not going to show you that in today's session. It was just important that we get through the government section, specifically asking contextual-based questions on your board of directors, on your certification. And that's exactly how you need to think about it when you are completing this POPI portal and your personal information impact assessment. Yes, Michelle, do you have any questions?
Peter, actually, you've led us into station 6. I just want to know if the legal documents, must it be approved by the lawyers?
Interesting question.
Lovely
Okay.
questions.
Yeah.
And maybe we could quickly head over, if we finish on the governance section,
Yes.
just to highlight where our policy documents are.
Perfect.
And who was involved, because you were heavily involved in that.
I was heavily involved in it, but I can't take, let's say, not even all, but any of the, let's call it.
It was a team effort,
I'm
Peter.
losing my train of thought here, but
It was
an
team effort.
absolute team effort when it came to the policies and procedures. So BMC, you met Abel last week. Once again, if you haven't had a look at that video, it's very important that you do go and do so. We speak a lot, and Abel speaks a lot about the theoretical side of POPI, so that you get a little bit of an overview exactly what you need to comply with at the end of the day. But Abel, our compliance officer, an amazing expert in compliance in the industry, who's been working with us, Michelle, for the last 15 years on our own compliance, has drafted these policies and procedures for us, but it went through an entire TPN process. It was actually 4 attorneys involved in this procedure right from the start. So myself, Greg, Jade, and Alison was involved in getting these procedures out. To get your procedures directly through the system, you click on the policies right over there, and then you're already going to notice that we've loaded on all of the policies and procedures in the original TPN format, that format that you get through the TPN shop. Remember how that looks with the lease packs and with all the packs that we released over this last 6 months. But they look and feel exactly the same as the previous documents, so they're quite easy to comply with. We have already done the legal grunt work and groundwork for you. So we've already run through these processes and policies for you. So as you'll notice, I mean, just running from the top, we've got accessible usage policies, access management and control policies and procedures, bring your own device policies, physical and environmental security policies, retention and destruction policy and procedure. That was one of those that we asked the question on specifically when it came to your control measures and what was in place. And here is one directly for you. You can all go and download them. They're available in the Word format, so you can go and place your own specific logo or whatever you'd like on the documents to make them incredibly applicable to your business itself. We've got website privacy policies, terms and conditions of use, and then all your other documents, specifically when it relates to data subject requests forms. So specifically if a data subject requests that information or what information is stored on your systems, you can go and access that. There's training registers, system access request forms. So if internally a person or a user of your business systems requires access to a different system that does contain personal information, you can give them access directly through these policies and procedures. These are absolutely vital for full POPI compliance, because you need to have these policies and procedures in place that sets out exactly the step-by-step process that you need to take as a business from an operational standpoint to be compliant in terms of your POPI process.
Thanks, Peter. There are some questions, and I see Tabasile's at the question at the top. I'm going to come back to it. I just want us to close off on the documents before I start getting into other.
I'm going to go back into those policies.
Perfect.
Yes.
So we've had a question from Stella. Can the documents be downloaded as a hard copy?
Of course, yes, they can. They can be downloaded directly through the system. If you sort of know how the TPN shop works, and the downloads off the TPN shop is exactly the same. You just click on the Word version and it's going to download that policy and procedure automatically for you.
And Peter, we're going to keep version control. So if we change versions, we'll let our clients know they can come get the latest version. Also, we're going to be adding to, I mean, I see we've already got the next pack of documents
Correct.
ready.
We've actually got, I think, 6 or 7 policies that still need to be added to the system for the second release of the policies and procedures that we're currently busy working on. Yeah.
Perfect. And then we've had a question about lease agreements. So do we need our attorneys to review our lease agreements?
Can I sound very pompous here, Michelle?
No, but you can do it nicely.
I will do it nicely. Okay. TPN has wonderful lease agreements available from the TPN shop. The TPN residential lease pack is incredibly cheap to use. And remember, who updates these documents? Every 3 months by our external drafting attorneys, and they are going to make sure you are completely POPI compliant through your entire leasing process.
Actually, it's not just our external attorneys, because SSL are involved, but also Alison Williams, who's our external attorney, our drafting attorney, and all of the TPN documents have already started their POPI journey in terms of compliance, because as you know, as TPN is a registered credit bureau, we're already POPI compliant due to our registration with the National Credit Act.
100% correct, Michelle. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to drop back down to Tabasile. Tabasile had a question to say, must NGOs and MPOs be POPI compliant?
Interesting. If you go back to the video that Abel spoke about last week as well, we actually had a lot of questions regarding who is POPI relatable to, or who does it apply to. It applies to any person that is processing personal information, and that includes your natural people, so people with ID numbers, passport numbers, as well as juristic parties, so people with registration numbers, if they're PTY limiteds, closed corporations, trusts, all of that. If you're processing personal information, you need to be POPI compliant. So regardless of whether being an NGO, regardless of even specifically being, let's call it a trade union perhaps, you need to be POPI compliant if you're processing personal information on any natural or juristic entity in the country.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Peter. And then we've got a question here from Station 6. Must we make our manual POPI related? I'm the information officer,
Okay.
and I'm currently busy with it.
Okay, so when they're talking about manuals, perhaps they're talking about company policy, perhaps training manuals, perhaps different policies and procedures like what we've got on all these policy documents. Yes, they all need to be POPI compliant at the end of the day. So you need to include POPI provisions for the processing of personal information if that process or that manual relates to processing of personal information. So hopefully I've captured that question.
Perfect. Dean's asked, Dean has asked, sorry, Dean, I combined your surname and your first name together there. Sorry if this is a dumb question, no dumb questions in this, in this process. If in the selling process you require the buyer to provide proof of funds for cash purchases and a bond pre-qualification for finance, would this still be okay?
It will still be okay, of course, but remember that information that you are asking from the specific buyer or seller, let's just talk about the normal sales process, is going to be personal information. So the processing of that personal information must be done in terms of POPI. So how do you process that information? What are you storing? What are you capturing? How long are you retaining it? How is that going to, at the end of the day, impact the person's personal information because it is being processed? So yes, all of those procedures must be POPI compliant in terms of how you keep the information, how you store it, how you process the information, as well as how you disseminate the information at the end of the day must all be compliant.
And importantly, Peter, if we can jump back to the consent versus is there a legal requirement? Yeah. There's a legal requirement to collect the information.
Of course.
Consent is not required,
no,
as the law requires vis-a-vis FICA to collect that information.
That's exactly it. And remember, that consent requirement is only a singular pillar in the 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of POPI. So you must still process the information with POPI in mind, but the consent is not necessarily required in terms of the legislation.
Okay, Shanaz is asking, do I need to select which of the documents to use, or could I use all of them? And could I be confident on the level of compliance on governance?
Shanaz, you are more than welcome to apply all of these policies and procedures that relate specifically to your business. So you can run through the entire list, pick those that are applicable, that you are busy utilizing, but most probably with your business, at the end of the day, you're going to be using almost all of these policies and procedures relating to the processing of personal information. Specifically, if you are an estate agency, if you are an individual landlord processing the personal information of your tenants, it's going to be vitally important that you put these policies and procedures in place so that you know at the end of the day that you're fully POPI compliant. From a compliance process and from a, let's call it, efficacy procedure and efficacy of the documents themselves, I can truthfully tell you that there have been multiple attorneys that have gone through this, and with Abel's specific process and with his expertise in compliance, yes, they are going to be very valuable for you and your business.
Perfect. Mari's asking, will TPN provide a template for the PIA manual?
For your processing of personal information that we're talking about now. Remember, that your personal information impact assessment, probably the one that you're referring to right now, what you need to do, a review and assessment of your business and the policies and procedures in place, the control measures, your inherent and residual risk, is directly done through the TPN POPI portal. We aren't going to give you necessarily a printable template on this. It is done directly through the TPN POPI portal.
Anna-Marie is asking, what is the timeline for keeping a hard copy of information after the tenant has left the property, and how should it be destroyed?
Okay, so this is also going to depend purely on this document for yourself, your retention and destruction policy and procedure. For the majority of the personal information that is being processed, there's certain different sectors of when the information needs to be taken off the system, specifically through requests, strangely enough, Michelle. So if I request, or let's use this as an example, there's an external service provider that does have my information, so for example my name, my cell phone number, and perhaps some sensitive personal information. If I did not grant consent for that person to process the personal information, I can request that they remove their or my personal information directly for their systems. Depending on how long the business transaction is with that specific tenant, you are going to have to keep that information also in terms of FICA on your books for a period of 5 years after the end of the business transaction, and that is obviously going to affect this quite substantially. But we do have that retention and destruction policy and procedure in place, and you can go and download it yourself and go and have a look at exactly how the retention and destruction must happen exactly in your own business.
So Peter, just to be clear, if there's a legal requirement to collect information, for example, it is because of a contract between a tenant and a landlord that has been entered into, and you're collecting information in terms of the FICA, there is a legal requirement that you do that. A tenant cannot withdraw that consent.
Of course.
Consent
Very
is
important
only
concept.
where there is no legal requirement to process the information. They've given you consent, for example, direct marketing. They could then withdraw that direct marketing consent from you. And at that point, you would have to just destroy it immediately.
100%. Thanks for contextualizing, Michelle.
Okay. Anna-Marie's asking, if you're managing a property and use just a laptop to store the information regarding tenants, hard copies in a cabinet, how does this work?
Okay. So most certainly you're going to have to put in different policies and procedures in place, specifically when it relates to backing up the data. When we did or went through all of these specific policies and procedures, one of the ones that I found very interesting is this backup and restoration policy and procedure. And this relates specifically to how information must be stored and utilized in your business, but also where it must be stored, what type of control measures and processes that you need to put in place to have that information stored, whether it be on an internal system, a laptop, a external hard drive, a cloud-based system. So seriously, this is going to depend on your own business and the context of how you are saving and processing information. Regardless, password protection, all of those things come into play. So it is quite a wide-ranging question. Anna-Marie, if you'd like to contact me afterwards, then I can show you exactly what policies and procedures you also need to have in place, specifically when it comes to the retention of those or retention of that information on different systems.
Pompa Realty Group is asking, can this portal also be used for sales side of the real estate business or only for rentals?
Pompa, it may certainly be used for the sales side of the business as well. It is not merely for rentals. We are actually going to open up this portal for use by schools and the processing of their personal information as well in the coming months. But for now, it is relatable to the property industry as a whole, but also as a business as a whole. So regardless of you're in the property industry or not, you can go and utilize this POPI portal for your specific personal information impact assessment, as well as your policies and procedures, your action plans, etc.
Shanaz is asking, what happens if I'm unsure on whether a person is a GDPR member or not? Should I answer yes, just in case?
Shanaz, what I would also suggest, and this is something that we always put out during these sessions, is if you are unsure of anything, how to utilize the system, what to answer in a certain section, remember, TPN has a help desk available that you can contact on the 0861 876 000 number. Michelle will place those details in the chat right away. If it's a legal-based query, specifically something like this, you're more than welcome to email legal@tpn.co.za. When we went to have a look at the impact assessment and had a look at the different functions, remember you can go and mark not applicable, as well as whether you being unsure if this process is specifically involved in your own personal information impact assessment. But give us a call beforehand. We're more than welcome to, would love to assist you through the process of POPI compliance as well.
Kelly Ann is asking, is there a guideline dealing what is considered a high level of control? E.g., someone may treat a laptop with a password as high, but someone else may treat that as low.
Of course, and this is going to depend on purely how you answer the question yourself. Regardless, there are most certainly different procedures and policies you need to put in place. Remember, when you're answering these questions, you are doing so to mitigate risk. You're doing this to mitigate risk of there being perhaps data breaches or things that happen in your business that is not in compliance with POPI. So you need to have a look at it in that way. If you've just got a laptop that is password protected, perhaps in your own mind that could be, wow, a high level of protection, whereas in somebody else's mind it's not necessarily so. So I would suggest also doing the research, asking the questions to us while you're busy going through that specific portal or that, let's call it, functioning of the business, and we'll be able to assist you afterwards as well with that.
Okay, the Living Room Properties are asking, I get all my application information via email and WhatsApp. If the application is not successful, can I just delete the ones that was not successful?
This is also going to depend purely on your retention and destruction policy. If that is your retention and destruction policy, you must absolutely make certain of how the information has been deleted. Has it been saved in some other folder as well through the deletion processes? Is that deletion actually done correctly? All of that is going to come into play. How you've just explained it to me and how the deletion works, we're obviously going to have a look and have to have a look at how it has actually been deleted and where it has been saved through that procedure. But usually, yes, just through the deletion and actually removing the record so that nobody can see it would be part and parcel to your retention and destruction policy in your business.
Peter, Eureka is asking, can you provide a landlord with a copy of the credit check when a new lease is approved?
Very interesting question. So, most certainly you can. And this is something that we have spoken about for the last, I don't know, Michelle, 4, 5, 6 years. Remember who the contract is between. The contract is between the landlord and the tenant. At the end of the day, the landlord needs to know the tenant's details and the tenant needs to know the landlord details. So that specifically processing of that personal information and the purpose in which it was processed is for leasing. It is a legal requirement for the landlord to know who the tenant is, and also he is entering into a contract with that specific tenant. So if he does not have all the information, he is not mitigating his own risk when it comes to the tenant's actual profile, as well as their propensity to pay or not to pay.
Peter, can I jump in? Thank you for that.
Yes, please, Michelle.
Can I jump in and remind our delegates that I have been posting the feedback forms with the link. If our members could just click on that link to provide us our feedback, it's always very appreciated and allows us to make changes as our clients are advising us.
Michelle, I actually just have to reiterate there as well, specifically for this module training with the 10 modules. Please remember to subscribe to the TPN YouTube channel and hit the notifications bell. That's going to give you all the notifications on the specific training that we are going to process during this time period, the journey that we're actually going to walk with you. So if you haven't done so, do it now. And that's going to give you all the information.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, we've pre-set these training sessions up for the next from January. This is the last for December, but from January, from January, literally every 2 weeks, we will be going through the different modules.
100% correct.
Mari's asking a question. I know it's been answered in the chat, but I do think it's important that we address it again. Is GDPR relevant when the website is hosted outside South Africa?
It is most certainly relevant. So the processing of personal information is not just in border, it's not just in South Africa. You need to go and have a look where your information is stored as well. Is it stored in a locale in South Africa or outside of South Africa? it is obviously going to be applicable, whether that be the GDPR or POPI compliance specifically for the processing of information cross-border as well. Definitely.
Yeah, the GDPR requires if you have someone who is a GDPR
That's
member,
a European citizen,
a tenant, a seller, a buyer, an employee, if you deal with anyone who is GDPR member and you have their personal information in your environment, wherever that may be, on your computer, on the cloud, in your office,
in South Africa, outside of South Africa,
you have a responsibility, an extra added responsibility to protect that information.
100% correct, yes.
Okay, cool. And Peter, I think I've asked all the questions. I think I've asked and answered all the questions, which gives us 5 minutes then to do a quick wrap up.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I don't need 5 minutes for the wrap up, but I'll take a couple of minutes here. Remember, everybody, if this is all that I leave you with today, this is a process. It's a procedure. POPI compliance is not from 0 to 100% in a day. It's something that you're going to have to not just implement now for the 1st of July, but it is continuous implementation of your specific policies, procedures, and your personal information impact assessment throughout POPI's existence, and that is after the 1st of July. So this portal is not just going to assist you for now in getting you ready for POPI compliance, but it is also going to assist you throughout the entire process as long as POPI is applicable in the country. Remember, please like and subscribe our page. You must all have a fantastic day further. I actually think this is our last webinar for the year, so you must all have a wonderful festive time period and see you again soon.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks to our members. Travel safe. Have fun.